Please welcome Charlie.
Good morning, Toastmasters and the Dean of the College. What I'm going to do today is try to explain how teachers teach, if anybody's trying to teach. You know, there's a lot more to it than just getting up in front of a room full of people and telling them everything that you know. You need to have some semblance of order, and we call that instructional design. And unfortunately, teachers don't have time to design. Teachers, well, there's a design model called ADDIE. Teachers seem to think they own it, but it really belongs to everything that gets designed. The ADDIE is an acronym for Analyze, Design, Develop, Implement, and Evaluate. It's been criticized because it's so linear. Well, what they don't do is apply ADDIE to the ADDIE process. In other words, you have to evolve that. It's got to be analyzed and designed. And if you really look at that process, analyze, design, develop, the E is all the way on the end. You don't wait to the end to evaluate. You evaluate continuously. And I think we do that here as Toastmasters. When you're doing a speech, you don't wait till the end to see how it worked. You get through a couple of lines and you go, no, that's not going to work. Let me try a different one. You reevaluate it, right? Continuously. So there's a little E in between every one of those letters. Analyze and evaluate your analysis. Design and evaluate that. Develop and evaluate that. Implement it, and that's where the teacher comes in. When he gets in front of the class, he implements it and he says, okay, that didn't work because I thought that just was as clear as day, and everybody's looking at me like I'm from Mars. Well, I've got to reevaluate how I presented it. Maybe I'm using the wrong terminology or something, and we know that as know your audience. Teachers have to know their audience too. So that's the basic process, and there are models that have all claimed to be the be-all and the end-all of the design model. And what they attempt to do is tell teachers how to analyze, design, and develop a lesson so that they can implement it and try it out. The problem is the teachers do the IE, do the end, the implement and evaluate. They're supposed to do the ADD, which of course means something else too.
What?
Right. Teachers are supposed to analyze, design, develop, but the flaw in that is how do teachers get paid? By contact hours. Well, they don't get paid really to analyze, design, and develop. They get paid to implement and maybe evaluate if they even have time for that. Teachers are paid to implement, which is the contact hours, which is the flaw in the whole process. There have been a couple of models, though, that, and this talk is not to find the flaws in it, but to try to find some commonality. There have been a couple of models that I need to compare and contrast, really. Dick and Kerry had developed a model some 45 years ago, back in the 60s. And it was a model where I consider it to be a little pseudo-intellectual because they're all trying to sound so cool with their terminology. And basically they're saying the same thing and trying to say it more intellectually than the other guy and try to make it sound different. There's a model called, like I said, Dick and Kerry. And that's one of the early, not the earliest, but one of the most common models. And in that model, what they do is the first three steps basically analyze, know your audience, you analyze your students. What do they already know? Where do you want to take them? And then how are you going to get there? It's called gap analysis. Basically, there's a gap between what they know and what you want them to know. And that's the first three steps of that. After that, you design a way to bridge that gap through instruction and strategies, and you would then either write your own lesson or material, or find a book that fits. Most teachers, of course, find a book that fits because that's a lot easier. Just buy a book off the shelf. I'm not going to mention this in my dissertation, but my experience has been that that the teachers haven't read the book. They just bought one and expect the book to do it for them, which is one of the problems with these models, is because people think that they are going to be the magic bullet. And that means that, well, we have the solution, we just implement it and it'll work by itself. It's like we just light the fuse and watch it burn. Well, that doesn't really work. What schools have now started to develop, and I've been involved in education. I've been a student for 40 years. And I guess I really need to pay more attention, because when they said a 4-year degree, actually you said 40 years. I just really have to pay attention, right? And I did. But during those 40 years, I learned a lot: astronomy and math and science and computers and all kinds of things. I had almost 1,000 credits and no degree. Then they wanted me to teach, and they said, well, do you have college behind you? I said, yeah, about 40 years. None. So I had to go back and put it all together. But what I did, besides learning all of that, is I started teaching. Because you can't help but notice that some of your teachers are teaching you, and some of them, well, aren't. And sometimes you have to steal the education, and sometimes they facilitate the education. The models are designed so that everybody gets the same education. And the real beauty that's come lately, that I can't understand why it took them so long, it's called a professional learning community, where teachers who are teaching the same subject, if you have a high school, something like that, you have 5 teachers teaching math. Well, you would think they'd all be teaching the same math. They are teaching the same math. Theoretically, they're all teaching algebra. They should be teaching it the same way. They're not. Some of them think one thing is important, some of them think another important. Some of them have a way of getting the point across, and some others have a different way. And it's just the luck of the draw which class you get into. Because how many of you hate algebra? Okay, now, is it because you hate algebra, or because your teacher just confused it so badly that you might have even understood it until he explained it? Well, yeah, history too. If something is taught correctly, you'll like it. If it's not taught correctly, you probably won't like it. The instructional models are designed so that everybody gets the same education, and a professional learning community is a conference of the teachers who teach the same thing, who will get together and talk about how I teach it and how effective I find it to be, and share those ideas. But in this competitive environment, does any teacher really want to help the other teacher do a better job? Right? We like to think we would. But if I'm going to help Ted be a better teacher, and they only need one math teacher and he's the other one, am I going to help him get my job? I'd like to think that I would rise above that.
Yeah,
but
right.
Where's the incentive? Right? The instructional design models are designed to remove that competitive antagonism between teachers, so that the students are the goal and the learner is the objective. There are 2 kinds of evaluation. I want to make one comment on evaluation. My thesis and my project was on effective, effective, and affective evaluation. Here at Toastmasters, we have both. Effective evaluation is when you evaluate me. It's external and extrinsic, and I may consider it valid or not. Affective is through the video, where you watch yourself and you evaluate yourself. That's more likely to be perceived as valid, right? That is the thesis, and that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie, and I wish you the luck of the Irish, but I know luck has little to do with it. It's all hard work and calculation. Mr. Timer, 1 minute for a comment, please.
And in evaluating our physically exhausted, but albeit still mentally with us, speaker, Karen Smart. Karen.
Good morning, fellow Toastmasters. and especially Charlie. Well, Charlie, I feel totally rested. I had 4 hours sleep last night. Today, Charlie is giving speech number, and actually I'm not even sure what number that is. He did a remarkable job of demonstrating the fact that no matter what, you can always find a manual speech to fit any speech into so that it will get credit for towards your goals in Toastmasters. So he's gave speech number 7, research your topic. And Charlie, you should feel relieved. I feel you did an adequate job of researching your topic. To go through the evaluation points, the first one is how well did the speaker's topic apply to the audience? And here again, I think we took an educational subject. We're an educational group. We're all here to learn. And understanding how people learn and ways to do it better is directly applicable to all of us, and you made it interesting for us. So you definitely addressed that very well. I think obviously, yes, it was, as I already said, it was very well researched since it's your dissertation and you've spent at least 1,000 hours or so on this. I think your points were very well supported. You explained ADDIE, I believe the acronym was, as well as ADDIE, which got a few guffaws from the audience, so that was a nice use of humor that you tied in there. You also talked about another model as well, the Kerry Model, which was another example of how you tied in your research to the point of the speech. Your purpose was very clear. You explained that at the beginning of your speech, and supported it throughout the speech with good examples. I felt your gestures were controlled but helpful and kept our attention. Just listening to a professor get up and talk can sometimes be boring, but your gestures and your body language was involved, but not so much that it was distracting, and you had a few gestures, like when you went like this, was enough to kind of catch our eye and keep us entertained, as well as appropriate to what you were saying at the time. As far as the organization, overall it was fairly well organized. I think that at the start you started to get a little bit off track. You went one direction, then you went back to the ADDIE explanation and got a little bit wound up in explaining that. But overall, it was very well organized, and I really commend you, and I'm going to try to do better next time I do a speech on 2 or 3 hours of sleep, because you've set the bar pretty high. Congratulations. Thank you.
Karen addressed Charlie's speech. This is something that you can do in the club. People go, I can go, oh, I can't do this. Yes, you can. This is what we're here for. It is to actually practice a presentation or a portion of your presentation that you may be doing outside of the club. So on the one hand, Charlie, I salute you for doing it, and I thank you for doing it. On the other hand, I was personally disappointed, and here's why. When you're doing this presentation, do the presentation. Don't say, well, I might mention this, I won't mention it. Do the presentation. Use your introduction to set the audience up completely, so you don't even have to waste time saying, here's what I'm going to be doing. And that's where your introduction. Now, there was some great humor in the introduction. I liked the 3 hours of sleep every night, so on and so forth. That worked quite well. We've all been there. But use the introduction to address those points, and then do the presentation. Don't tell us what you might or might not do. Do it. Because this is the strength of this club, and the strength of any Toastmasters club, the ability to present something, if it's stand-up comedy, if it's a soliloquy, if it's a benediction, whatever you want to look at it. Use this club for this practice, and set us in the mindset for that. Use that introduction. That's where you can come off with this point. But I did like the fact that he got up and he said, here's what I'm going to be talking about, and began to address the points. And there were many good humorous points that were in some cases tongue-in-cheek but very serious in the way of getting the object across, that educators are hampered by these structures that are completely ridiculous if you don't realize there are key points that have to be addressed. And Charlie addressing 40 years of learning. Every day you are alive, you are learning. And so overall, I would like to see a much stronger, if you're going to do this kind of speech, but do it.
Speaker.